Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Well, hey everyone, happy Monday. Welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for season 2, we are diving into Blazing Saddles 1, Watch That Boy Redneck Minute at a Time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
And a guy who hung out with us over the weekend, taught us all about delivering the mail, analyzing music, and talking about how Instagram works. We've got Gordie Adams joining us back. Gordie Mailman Adams. Welcome back, Gordie.
Thanks very much. I think I ate a little bit too much popcorn on Saturday night when we watched Creature from the Black Lagoon, but I'll be okay.
You're careful, because if you leave a Black Lagoon anywhere, I got to clean that up. Well, we are here for minute number 66 of the film Blazing Saddles, and it is going to start off with all the rest of the railroad guys all crowding around Bart, and then Charlie almost acting like the big brother trying to keep everybody off of the celebrity that is now Sheriff Bart. And we're going to end with Taggart on horseback looking with incredulity at the Sheriff of Rockridge, saying, "Here we take the good time and trouble to slaughter every last Indian in the West, and for what?" There's a lot that happens in this little exchange.
This is a big minute.
So, I know we don't get a whole lot of Gene Wilder for you, Gordie, but it is going to set the stage for what comes later in the week. And I think what we have to talk about is right off the bat, it is yet another confrontation between Sheriff Bart and the bad guys.
Yeah, for sure. I looked in the background. I scrubbed a little bit and watched, and I will say that there's a good shot of Gene with his hand on his chin, just like when he's going to do in the next couple of minutes after this, where he's just so stoic and just, ready for action, but not letting anyone know. He's just like kind of assessing the situation. I like that. That's a nice, subtle Gene Wilder move.
Yeah, I think it does give him a sense that he's still up on his horse, so we don't lose him necessarily in frame when all the guys come crowding around Bart, who did, of course, get off his horse. So
yeah.
And that's an important thing as well to remember for the staging of what's still to come. Because all these other guys are going to come up at the end of the minute on horseback. We've got some lines here, but I think Charlie, once again, is probably massaging him, and it also sounds like it just cuts off with the word vine. Do you hear that? Don't you touch your brother and your brother's vine.
Brother, don't leave us your brother and mess up the brother's vines.
No. This is how I see it or hear it, is that he was supposed to say his fine clothes or his fine start, fine, F-I-N-E, and then they cut it. I just think it's a bad edit. I hate to bring up a flaw with Mel Brooks's movie making, but I think that they just cut it wrong so that we could bring the bad guys in. Because he was either going to say finery or fine clothes or fine looks. I think it was just a bad edit. That's how I see it.
Let me tell you why I think I hear the word vine, which didn't make any sense to me when I was a kid. I'm like, vine? Don't you touch your brother's vine? And maybe I thought, maybe you could say he was trying to say fine. It's kind of screwed. I don't know. Here's the line. Charlie's supposed to say to everybody, don't crush the brother. Check your enthusiasm. Don't be messing up the man's vines with the soil from your toil.
What?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
That's terrible.
Oh, so why did he try to make it so mealy-mouthed? That's so funny. I guess I'm a little behind. Well, I'm not behind. Who wrote the script?
Well, a lot of people actually.
Yeah,
five total folks. The important thing is Mel Brooks came in to start the write. It had been originally written by Andrew Bergman, who wrote Tex X. That was his script, sort of a play on words of Malcolm X. It was shopped to Mel. Mel came in, so Mel and Andrew got together. They brought in two other writers initially, but they also brought in Richard Pryor to be a writer on this.
Right. I know that those three, but I guess my point is, like, who wrote that and then it got axed? Because that doesn't sound like something Richard would do or Mel would do. I'm not familiar with Bergman's stuff, but
And I'll be honest, I grew
really
up
odd.
I was very young in the 70s. Did people used to call threads, like, I knew that term, like, check out the man's threads, like his clothes.
Yeah.
When did they ever call them vines?
Never.
Never. I've never heard that term.
So is that a term that comes from some different time, and Mel Brooks was trying to play with it because everyone would have been familiar with the term threads, so they're playing with it and saying, don't touch the brother's fine vines with your soil of your toil? I mean...
This is a little bit of the Mandela effect, I think, that everybody hears things a little bit differently. I have this, and I will still go to my grave having this argument that there is no way that Nerf herder was in the actual script of Star Wars. I always heard nerve herder, like hurting someone's nerves, because that makes sense, because she's flustered. Okay, we're talking about Empire Strikes Back, people, in case you didn't know. And she
First
calls
of all,
Han Solo
if anyone's listening and didn't know that, they just stop listening now.
Right.
There's no way on earth that nerf herder makes any sense at all. She said nerve herder, and I will argue with anybody. I don't care what the closed captions say or what the script says. There's no way that's true. So anyway.
To quote Igor, well, you'd be wrong then. I had no problem with Nerf herder, being that all these creatures all have weird names anyway. The fact that they just named it after the soft football we used to play catch with didn't bother me as a kid. He's a Nerf herder. I don't know what a Nerf is, but... So I don't know. I couldn't find, and Walt, I don't know if you were able to find anything, but have we ever heard that term vines to mean your threads, your clothes, what you're wearing, your attire?
I've even just checked Urban Dictionary, and there's nothing there. And they usually...
Well, if it's not an Urban Dictionary, then it definitely doesn't exist.
It definitely doesn't. So, of course, 3 of their definitions have to do with the online...
video thing.
Video thing. But yeah, no, there's nothing in there about clothes. I have never, and I'm pretty hip. And I've never.
That's how I go. I go home every day, and I describe you that way. Right. Like, my buddy Walt, that real hip guy. People says the guy with the really big hips. Oh, right. That's how you're supposed to say
that
it.
Is true. So, yeah, I have never heard that term for clothes. Now I know there's a store here in Georgia called Vineyard Vines. That's a clothing store, but I just assumed that was just kind of random words they threw together. I don't think that has anything to do with clothing.
Oh, it's interesting. Let's continue on, because there's a whole character that must have gotten dropped. Somebody got mad. They got cast as Tony, and then they never used Tony again. Because as more and more railroad workers are come up and are giving Bart high fives, and you hear Charlie, ad-libbing and trying to keep people off of the good man's vines, Tony, all of a sudden, says a man breaks through the crowd. He is dressed in a tuxedo and a cowboy hat. It is none other than Tony Martin. Tony says, "Don't you see what this means? Look, a tin star on a black man's chest. This is a tremendous step forward, not just for him, but for all of us. White, black, yellow, and Armenian, working side by side, spanning America with rails of steel to bring all of us together in a symphony of brotherhood." Suddenly, a large orchestra begins to play from behind them. Tony whips off his hat and begins to sing. The Cohens and the Kellys, the Thompsons and the Vermicellis, they're all a part of this tenement symphony.
The Cohens and the Kellys, the Campbells and Vermicellis, all form a part of my tenement symphony. The Cohens.
It goes on and on and on.
So wait, what's this character's name?
Tony Martin.
I hope that whoever wrote Tony Martin was taken out and dragged behind a horse until he was dead. That is a horrible, horrible character. That is a terrible line. I am glad that is not in this movie.
Tony Martin was a real person.
Somebody that they hated?
No, he was an American singer.
Well, I'm glad he wasn't available the day they shot this.
That song is actually a Sammy Davis Jr. song too, the Tenement Symphony. I think we already again. Here's an example. And Gordie, I know you're staying good with our minutes. You're not going back in time, but we can talk about it in the past. We already had the joke of one symphony playing in the middle of the desert. Or a big band. We had Count Basie.
Count Basie.
We didn't need another musical act completely out of context in the middle of this scene. It would have not only slowed everything down, I would have been like, you kind of already had this joke.
Yeah, that sounds right. Because as you were describing it, I sort of slipped into another dimension and wasn't paying attention. But then I was like, oh, that's the Count Basie thing. Why would they do that twice? That's good that got axed.
Always like to keep my audience riveted.
Exactly. Well, and so these lyrics also, like, that's the whole point of the movie. Like, why do we have to have this re-emphasized in a way that makes no sense?
Weird spoon feeding, yeah. I'm so glad that they didn't spoon feed. That's just somebody justifying their script job.
And remember what I said throughout this whole thing, Walt? You never hear Bart make a speech. You never hear him make a speech about why we're all one big brotherhood. We're a melting pot. We should all be together and work together. And who cares? I said, that's just dumb. Just reflect through action who you are. Mm-hmm. Here we have a speech.
Yeah, that's the right way to write something. You're right.
And the speech is, I'm like, I don't need this. That's what the movie's all about. You already said that, Gordie. It's exactly right. That's the movie. I don't need you to tell me what I'm already watching.
Right.
Excuse me while I whip this out. That's the only speech he needed to make.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that is really not good. And again, I mean, like you said, I think the biggest problem I have with it is, well, I think it's terrible.
The biggest problem?
I think the second biggest problem is that we already have done this, and that was perfect. The Count Basie, that was really a perfect joke and and it was timed really well because it was a good transition from one thing to another. But that was just dumb.
It is. It doesn't work at all. I can't justify it. I don't even. And it doesn't look like they even filmed it. I think they scrapped it once they realized what it would cost to get the singer, get a symphony. They probably learned, actually. We found out when we talked with Bert and Gilliam, it took like 90 minutes just to set up the little platforms for Count Basie's crew, and those guys were dying.
Yeah.
They were just sitting out there baking for that one little transition scene. They weren't going to do this all over again with a full orchestra.
No, this isn't a musical.
No, not really.
Right, exactly. I think it's diegetic music. I think that's the term, where someone is listening, like there's a scene where someone's listening to music, and then that music is what you're hearing in the movie while watching the movie. And I think that's the fun play that they did with Count Basie in the beginning. Is just like, you just think that's just the background music, and then you say, oh, that's actually really happening. Funny joke once.
Right.
That's it. That's it.
You think it's the soundtrack, and then you realize, oh, no, it's actually really there.
Yeah. That's a hilarious joke once.
Right. It doesn't need to be done again. You've established it.
And there is a difference between absurd and humorous. And this would have been both absurd and stupid. It would not have been absurd and humorous.
More on stupid, yeah. No need.
If you like the idea of saying, once you've done something once, don't play the joke out again, then you're going to love this next cut.
Oh, boy.
Because just as he's in the midst of singing this whole song with this symphony behind him, Taggart comes riding up with all of his men, and what he's supposed to say first is, just what in the wide, wide world of sports is going on around here? Get back to work, Martin.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, Tony Martin, the guy that's singing the song.
Oh,
he's even forgotten the guy singing.
No, I told you I went to another dimension while you were talking about that. So I forgot his name.
When you said that, you sounded a lot like people who do know me, and that happens all the time.
Oh, yeah. Alan, were you saying something?
Wait.
Oh, right.
I hear dead air. He must be done.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, would it have worked to use the wide, wide world of sports again?
No, it would not have. That would have been horrible.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't have that again. You don't need to hit. Yeah. You don't need to hit me over the head with a shovel.
No, and there are lines in this movie that work duplicated. That was not one of them. That was good where it was.
No, it's such comedy gold.
Awesome.
Why diminish it?
Yes, absolutely. And you don't need a callback to that for any reason. You know, and they've duplicated the Rock Ridge. They have duplicated...
Oh, there were a lot of lines that are mirrored, but it's more about two people interacting, not saying the same line themselves, that they used 30 minutes earlier in the movie.
And it was such a unique, humorous line that you don't need the double punch on it. I think that actually the second punch would have destroyed the whole joke.
I do think this is probably one of the things where when you're sitting in a room writing, you're all giving yourselves high fives. Well, that's going to be funny. Do it again. And then you get on set, and then you start hearing it out loud. You start looking at it and you go, it doesn't work a second time.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's go ahead and then get into back here to when Taggart, because in the midst of all of these guys celebrating, and this is similar to the first one, when they're all like not working and, you know, like, get back to work. I tired you guys to get a little track laid, instead of all of the white railroad workers jumping around when Taggart shows up. It's sort of the mirror opposite. All of the black and Chinese and Irish railroad workers are all happy and excited and dancing around, but they're not dancing around like the guys were.
Right.
They're just really, truly, they're more real. Like we talked about on Friday. These guys are more real in their jubilation. Taggart comes riding up with all these guys on horseback, and he tries to get control of the scene right away. With right off the bat, he does say when he recognizes, and I love Slim Pickens, he looks Bart up and down first. He takes a good 8 or 10 seconds to just really look at Bart and go,
Well, holy mother of pearl.
Right, holy mother of pearl, love it.
and then it becomes a very I'll insert Taggart's line here, what he says next. But after identifying that he recognizes Bart, I guess we should be, we take our small victories where we have him. He at least recognizes Bart.
It's that nigga went and hit me on the head with a shovel.
He goes,
Now what the hell do you think you're doing with that 10-star, boy?
Now, Walt, you and I chatted about this before we even got on air today, and I wanted to recap a little bit of our conversation. He doesn't address Taggart back with the use of the N-word, because he sort of floated it out there more for Lyle. Like, he wasn't necessarily addressing Bart. He was looking at him, but it's more like he was talking sideways, like, that's the uppity, that hit me on the head with a shovel. But when he addresses Bart directly and calls him boy,
right,
that touches a nerve with Bart.
Yeah, and Gordie, this was kind of the conversation that we were having. Is it was really interesting to me that he did not take as much offense to the N-word as he did to being called boy. And I mean, I know that calling somebody a boy is really, really demeaning. It's meant as a very personal slight to him. So I that was my first response to this, is that it's almost shocking that he takes that so personally. But I do love his response. I love that he says,
"Watch that boy shit, redneck. You talking to the sheriff of Rock Ridge."
And
he's in control. He's like, yeah, you use that word, and guess what? That's not who you're talking to right now.
Yeah, and this is basically him saying, "Hey, fuck you, redneck."
Right. Well,
right.
The way I saw it and take it, and this is my interpretation, is the N-word. He doesn't give that word any power over him. Mm-hmm. But when he's being talked to, and actually, and because Taggart is on a horse, he is both literally and figuratively being talked down to. Mm-hmm. And he is not, the dude does not abide.
No.
He is going to call that right back. And what I love, Walt, is he knows he's the sheriff, but he also knows you don't talk to me that way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he has no problem in front of all the other railroad workers calling it right back and calling the fact that he's the sheriff.
Yeah. So let me ask you something, to put something in context for me real quick, because I can't remember if Taggart knows that he's the sheriff. The last thing I remember, the last thing Taggart knew was he was going to get hung.
Correct.
So when he rides up, does he know that he's the sheriff, or is he surprised?
He's surprised.
I don't think he knows he's the sheriff.
Yeah,
at all.
No,
I
think
he's
he's oblivious. He's he's just the dumb henchman who he's not been given all of the information.
So there's
no way
everybody
told him any of that. Yeah.
Okay, right. So for everybody at this work site, they are surprised that he is still alive.
Everyone.
And they are really surprised that he's the sheriff of Rock Ridge.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now this is all This is what we would call dawning revelation.
Okay.
It is suddenly dawning on everybody. Like for the white guys, our worst nightmare.
Yeah.
For all the railroad workers, a new hero.
That's right.
And you wonder what the social network was, is like how they found out that Bart died, and how that was even given out.
That's interesting. How did the word get out?
Yeah,
Like how does Charlie even know? Because he was his friend, but it's like, oh yeah, Bart's dead.
Maybe Boris has his own YouTube channel. He's like, on today's show, we've hung the following.
Here are Tuesday's hangings.
Look, I told him everyone's equal in my eye.
It's Instagram. That's what it is.
It was on his Instagram.
It was on his Vine.
It's Vine. He did a 9 to 6 second
It's
Vine.
That's
That's where Vine comes from. Don't
There
you
you
touch
go.
the
There's
brother's
the
Vine.
origins.
That's his channel.
Now we know.
Well, I'm sure it was the scuttlebutt around camp, though. I'm sure they came back and said, "Hey, he's getting hung for hitting me with the
Right.
shovel."
Okay, well, you know
Watch
what?
out. Up in the quicksand. Bart's dead. Yeah.
I'm
right.
going to pull on something that, at least for now, in the time that this podcast is recording and continuing, one of my all-time, my wife and I's favorite show right now to watch is Game of Thrones, which, of course, is sort of a magical version of the whole War of the Roses, all of the kings and queens maneuvering themselves in England and Europe. What I love is how people know things hundreds and thousands of miles away from where the events took place. And then you've got these two characters, Littlefinger and Varys, who are like advisors, but they are both known to have their network of spies, people who are always kind of looking out and watching and reporting. And so I don't know that wouldn't happen, that people just have a network of information where people just repeat things because they know somebody down the line is going to want to know.
Yeah.
Ravens.
Yeah,
Ravens
they sent ravens.
And the Nextdoor app. Those are the two things.
The Nextdoor app, they checked on their neighbor's activity.
Well, it's kind of funny, but one of my best sources of information in a neighborhood is if I can grab the mailman. And so when I'm out doing an investigation, if I can find the mailman, he can tell me if somebody still lives somewhere, where they've gone, who has the neighborhood scuttlebutt, what happened in a particular incident. So if I'm out doing an investigation, I always try to go talk to the mailman.
That's my role in this community for the last 30 years has been that guy. So yeah.
Well, and you probably know as much about the community that you work in as anybody does.
That is a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
So Gordie is one of Varys's little birds.
That's right.
Yeah.
He flits and flaps around. Just seems so unobtrusive. It's just the mailman, but he. Oh, you know what? It's just like the scene in Breakfast Club when they're making fun of the janitor. And it's like, that's okay. You want to make fun of me? That's great. I get it. But guess what?
Learned a couple of things. I looked through your letters, looked through your lockers. I listened to your conversations. You don't know that, but I do. I am the eyes and ears of this institution, my friends.
I go through your
You're not
lockers.
the first person to say that. That's great.
I love that. I go through your lockers. I go through the files. I know everything about everyone. I remember when I watched the movie Breakfast Club, that's the only time Bender ever found that he was like not in control, that dawning of
He thought he knew everything.
Speaking of dawning realization, he was just like, "Oh my God, I was trying to make fun of the janitor, saying that maybe you could be the janitor," and then all of a sudden it's like, "Wait a minute, I didn't realize." I actually here's a nice little segue. I had someone. We had one of these classes in college where, you just bring up topics and you learn how to discuss things and sort of see things from a different perspective if you want to argue and I don't mean argue like blah, 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 bicker. I mean truly learning how to make an argument. Yeah, debate. Yeah. Someone said, what's the more important role in society, the brain surgeon or the garbage man? And of course, everybody immediately goes, well, the brain surgeon. And I said, okay, that's great. The brain surgeon, that's why they're, it's a highly respected job. We always talk about if someone's really smart, wow, they're a brain surgeon. Then they brought up an example of, I think it was back in the 70s at one point in time, that New York City officials went on strike. All the sanitation workers went on strike. And the city nearly shut down 3 days after them not doing their job. And so the argument was, well, then who really is more important to a functioning society? The brain surgeon?
Yeah.
Or the guys that are making sure that your streets don't get so clogged up that everything comes to a grinding halt?
Yeah, I'd say it's the garbage man.
And when people start thinking bigger and wider, Funny how we're talking about Blazing Saddles and opening your mind. I love having these kind of games. Yeah, we are just pawns in the game of life.
That's right. Well, and I've heard the same thing about, kind of along that same line of who is more important. Is it the brain surgeon or the guy who keeps the clean water and the sewage separate?
Yeah, we don't want him mixing up which pipe goes where.
No, we definitely don't. So there are a lot of things that you kind of go, oh, wow, gosh, that's that is much more important.
The brain surgeon or the guy who fixes his tire on the side of the road because he got a flat on the way to performing the surgery.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sort of thing.
See, I love these little mental games you can play. I mean, there is no, that's the thing though. There is really no right or wrong answer because if you have
there's no hierarchy. Yeah,
because if you're the one who happens to have the brain tumor, you're not calling the garbage man.
Right.
Right. So, but it's a fun exercise to get kids, especially college students, to start opening their way of looking at the world. And everything is contextual.
That's right.
You know, it's called empathy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a dreadful lack of that. Would you say that's a different topic for a new podcast?
Yeah. Once again.
But, I mean, we even see it here in this scene that Taggart is not empathetic. Taggart's kind of a jackass, and Bart puts him in his place.
Right. And I want to ask you this, Walt, because you are our resident redneck expert. You are our resident redneck. What do you think about this firing back sort of it's another sort of epithet. It's just maybe it's a little bit easier to digest because it's not so racially motivated, but what do you think about him coming back with that line where he says, "Watch that boy redneck"?
I think it's great. I think it is absolutely a perfect line. I love the writing of it, and I love the delivery. And I love the fact that Bart didn't take this lying down. And if you think about it, this is the only time I can think of in the movie where Bart strikes out at somebody. It's
a direct challenge.
He lashes back at somebody.
Right.
Yeah, because even when the lady uses the N-word towards him, he kind of holds that shocked smile, right, and he doesn't attack her. And I can't think of another place in the movie where he lashes out at somebody like this.
And I think if you're going to do it, this is the perfect one to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And, I was looking at the term redneck, and Wikipedia has a great definition of it, I think, that fits what's going on here. Redneck is a derogatory term, chiefly but not exclusively applied to white Americans perceived to be crass and unsophisticated, closely associated with rural whites of the southern United States. Its usage is similar to the meaning of cracker, hillbilly, or white trash.
Mm-hmm.
So he uses the perfect term for somebody who is calling him boy. So it is like the perfect return insult.
The difference between these epithets is that the meaning behind it is often lost. And there's a difference between calling somebody a name to demean them and calling somebody a name to make fun of them. Whereas redneck and cracker are making fun of the white person, where the other words that we know are actually to demean you and make you less than. Cracker, it comes from whip crack.
Right.
So that's a sort of making, not making fun of, but when he's hurt by boys, because all his life or historically that's a demeaning thing, whereas hillbilly or redneck is just kind of like, yeah, you're a fool. That's how I see it, at least.
And I'm going to throw a couple of different words and see if it works in this conversation. One sounds like it's meant to be a derogatory term. One means to be personally demeaning to the individual. One is more like it's derogatory. Like if I call you, you're nothing but poor white trash, you might have all the money in the world. What that just means is you've got no judgment, or you've got no, you've got no sophistication. Right?
Yeah. My wife doesn't, my wife has called me out on calling people white trash before. It's like, when I heard that, I was like, yeah, you're right. That's not good.
Yeah, but demeaning. It's not, is it demeaning or is it derogatory?
Or is it descriptive?
Or do we care? It's descriptive.
Well, we're not here to solve these problems.
It adequately describes.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's That's the microscopic view of
and
words.
I would also say that there are terms that have a different level of meaning in different parts of the country. And if you say white trash in the South, it doesn't have the force of terminology, I think, that it might have if you said it in California.
All right, I'm going to say something completely different then. I'm going to completely derail that.
Okay.
I think maybe what we're trying to figure out how to parse, and maybe what doesn't work is we're leaving a component out. The intent behind the person saying it.
Sure.
The intent.
Because if I joke around with you and I'm like, I just said, you're our resident redneck expert, you don't sense that I'm in any way calling you out, making fun of you, demeaning you. I'm not using your audience.
Right.
But when I see the person who is the, at going to church, pretending they're one thing, and then they're out doing all the most horrible stuff the next day, I'm like, you're just nothing but poor white trash. I mean, I am being kind of demeaning to that person.
Well, and when I use the term redneck to describe myself or some of my other friends, I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to shoot guns, I like to,
yeah, you're a redneck.
I'm a redneck. I mean,
but guess what?
I wear jeans to church. I mean, I there are certain elements of being a redneck that I like. That I like spending time in the woods. That is, I take pride in those things. There are certain elements that are attributed to rednecks that I would absolutely, I'd go to blows with somebody over. That
you would take offense if they put you in that same bubble.
That I definitely, hate racism. Those are, one of the things I like about doing this movie is that I like being able to kind of punch racism in the face along with Mel and Gene and Cleavon. So that, there are aspects of, now, if you call me white trash, that's a whole different ball game. I don't have, well, not always have, like a dishwasher in the front yard or, whatever.
You don't have a couch on the front porch with a refrigerator?
Well, yeah, I have that.
Well, okay, then. So
that's redneck. Yeah. That's the South, right? When you don't live in the South, you don't have that. But I would say that the negative aspects that are attributed to rednecks, like you have here, where he's just a racist ass, that is not the case.
Well, I think and I don't want to go, because we could go way deep and we're never going to solve it in a podcast. Yeah. I do think what I want to leave the listener with is we have to always remember the intent behind the conversation. And I think sometimes we forget that. And maybe people sometimes, and in this, I'm just in general, I'm saying, maybe somebody were to, I might not know that redneck would bother you. But then you'd be able to say, hey, I kind of don't like that term. Like, oh, I am so sorry, Right. So you would realize that there was never an intent to harm. And I think sometimes we have to be a little just more open to the idea of let's pay attention to how things are being used.
And of course, if I didn't know you and you called me that, I might kind of go, okay, wait, what's this guy?
Well, that comes across now as judgment.
Right. And are you trying to use the term like Bart does here to say you're an ignorant racist?
Right.
Well, I would take offense to that because I'm not a racist. Now, ignorant, we could argue about.
Well, right. In some things.
Right. So but I think, too, that if somebody just called me a redneck, all right, well, but what do you mean by that? Right. And now there are certain words that you can't say.
No, I think we agree.
So inflammatory.
I don't think we've had one guest yet, including our current guest here, Gordie, that there are just certain words that you just don't say.
Right.
So
if you want to bleep this out, you can. But there's a word called mailman that can be taken a couple different ways. And
wait a minute. Okay, now I'm suddenly intrigued.
Yeah. And I want to kind of wrap up this part of the thing by saying it very clearly that most people, like little kids coming out, mailman, or you're the mailman. Those are all positive. But I had a girlfriend once who told me, you're just a mailman.
Oh.
And so there you go.
What had you done to her?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect illustration of intent.
No, the other way around. It was that she just didn't think she thought I was less than. Whereas most people think I'm more than. So it's intent. So, and forever I will remember the way it was said. It was just like, oh, it just cut me. It's like, oh God, that sucks to hear it that way.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Words are words based on the intent. And that's all there is to it. So,
well, we speaking of intent, talk about the what Taggart seems to surmise as the history of the West.
oh, geez.
I'm laughing because it is such a ridiculous statement. You can't imagine somebody actually thinking this way. So it's almost like you laugh because how could anyone say this? But this line.
Well, now, if that don't beat all. Here we take the good time and trouble to slaughter every last Indian in the West, and for what?
For what? And perfectly timed to end right at the minute. Perfect.
And
for what?
Oh, I mean, if you did not need to, if you needed more to reinforce what kind of a person Taggart is, there's the line.
Yeah.
So my question is, do we think of, once again, using the word redneck, redneck backwards thinking country boys, do they act like this, or was he actually reinforcing that that's where it comes from? Because every single guy that I know in my town who is like this.
Well, that would make sense. Otherwise, they'd be someone else.
But I'm saying it doesn't matter where you're born, doesn't matter what part of the country you're from. It's like the old Dave Cross bit about, it's like Hicks are everywhere. They all have that same drawl, no matter what's like. I'm from Australia, but I talk. It's just like I don't understand. Like, the chicken and the egg when it comes to how these people speak and act. So did Taggart reinforce it, or was Taggart just a caricature?
Well, I'm a big fan of the phrase, and sometimes this, again, helps pull us back and remember there's a reason why stereotypes ever come into existence. If there wasn't some commonalities among a segment of the population you're looking at, then that stereotype wouldn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean everyone adheres to the stereotype. But, there are just certain things that are going to be associated with a segment of a population, depending on what it is. I do a lot of theater work. There are people that will make assumptions about, oh, you're a theater person. Well,
right.
But I'm not, I don't follow every single lockstep with every other actor you may have ever met that was ever on stage. Now we're being very bigoted. We're thinking we can use one person to identify who you are. You got to learn who I am. But on the flip side, I will say we do tend to be a little silly and goofy, and we don't necessarily value hard labor sometimes, being in theater versus being on stage and doing what we think is more culturally significant.
Hanging out with girls.
I think that one thing, and I guess this is a message that really, like, all of America needs to hear and embrace. There are assholes everywhere, and there are good people everywhere. And it doesn't matter, like, what party you're in or what segment of society you are or what your preferences towards anything are. Like, there are assholes who are NASCAR fans, and there are assholes who are,
go to the symphony.
Go to the symphony. And those are the people we kind of need to weed out.
Wait a minute. You're making it sound a little bad when you say weed out. Like, let's hunt them down.
No, not hunt them down and kill them, Alan.
It's a little final solution.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, like,
tamp that down.
Yeah, those are the people who, like, we need to identify and go, yeah, that's not who you want to be like.
To implement the Soylent Green plan.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, no, not that. But like, those are the people who are, who we need to ignore, and, like, their opinion shouldn't matter because
not give them visibility, not give them their give them the platform, but not put any credence into what they're saying or how they implement their views.
I agree.
And don't let them...
with baseball right now. People are talking about, like, all these young baseball players who are kind of assholes, but they're young, and doesn't mean they're not good baseball players, or doesn't mean they're not good, contributors to the entertainment thing. But it's just like, yeah, there's guys that are jerks on the field, and there's a lot of nice guys. But
right, and I think that's the thing, is there are guys who are jerks, and there are guys who are nice guys in everything,
every aspect,
and we can't make the straw man argument that says, well, all people of the opposite political party of me, or all people who are, live in the South and like to hunt and fish, they're all that way.
Yes.
Anytime you talk in absolutes, you're gonna be found wrong.
That's right.
I don't believe in absolutes. Yeah. And I also believe in the phrase, I'm not going to let people live rent free in my head. So
right.
I try not to give people any more time up there than they need.
Well, and that's the other thing. If you call me even if somebody who I don't like and don't respect calls me something, well, and maybe that's part of it is I don't respect them, so I don't care what their opinion is.
Exactly, like I let it go.
Yeah, if somebody calls me a redneck and I don't like that person, well, why should it bother me? I already don't like them.
I already don't like. Now I don't like you even more.
Right. It's like, well, your opinion just doesn't matter to me. So
case by case basis.
That's right. That's now if somebody who I respect says, hey, look, you're a real jackass. Well, I'm going to kind of want to.
Well, now you'll take
find out what it is that they're talking about, and maybe I need to make a change.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think we're all in agreement here. We're all violently in agreement with one another.
That's right. And everybody else is wrong.
That's a phrase I love using when my wife is arguing the exact same point I am, but she wants it to be the way she happens to be phrasing it. I'm like, we're just in violent agreement with one another.
That's very true.
So, all right, well, as we wrap it up, because we don't get to hear the rest of Taggart's speech, that's going to come tomorrow. But this is our last day with our good friend here, Gordie Adams from the GORDCAST and some other things. Before we get to where people can find you, follow you, and maybe even engage in conversation, or if there are other podcasters and are looking for a guest. You are a fantastic guest, by the way. Were there any other things that you had written down for this minute we needed to discuss?
I'll tell you this. This is the very first podcast I've ever done where I did not write down any notes. Zero. This is just all off the dome. I've just been, because this movie is so in my head already. It's been reinforced these last 2 minutes, clearly, but it made me go back and watch the movie from the beginning this morning. And, you guys were still asleep. You guys were sleeping in, and I woke up and made some Pop-Tarts. And
I was wondering where my Pop-Tarts went.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I don't get them very often. And when I stayed at your place, it was like, I got to have the Pop-Tarts. And so many wonderful feelings came over, even though it's this really polarizing movie in this environment we're in now. But this is great, and I love to talk about things in detail. This is like getting together with a couple guys you haven't seen in years, and you just start talking and breaking things down by minuscule point by point, and then arguing about it and having it go over here and over there. I love those sort of conversations. So this is the perfect environment for it.
Well, I think that's one of the coolest things about podcasts is that you kind of have the time to do that, where maybe on a radio show you don't, or whatever.
And on the listener side, I might miss the episode where you happen to be talking about this, but with a podcast, I can listen at my leisure. I can binge, or I can fall behind for 3 weeks and get caught back up.
And you can also, the cool thing about it is that I can give you, I was on this podcast. You can listen to that podcast. You already know my sensibility. You know my voice. And hey, I can get along with that guy. When I listened to you guys the very first time on The Young Frankenstein, it was like, yeah, I could totally be part of this conversation. That would be fun. I really don't even know offhand, but there are a few podcasts where I go, this isn't working for me. I wouldn't put my flag up and say, hey, but this
pick me.
But this one was just like you can do the same. You can listen to my podcast and go, oh, okay, all right. So it's a really cool auditioning process.
Absolutely.
Well, there's one very popular national podcast where I'm like, if I was on that podcast, we'd go to Fist City.
Go to Fist City.
but most of the other podcasts, I'm like, even when I disagree with some of the hosts, I'm like, I would still like to sit down and talk to them about this, because we would have a good conversation.
Yeah, conversations. I have a hard time with the people who just talk, like the Bill Burrs, and they're funny and whatever, and it's a talent, but I like conversations, not just an hour of opinion.
Yeah, me too. And Gordie, you said you had no notes. I have one note for this episode.
Oh, okay.
And my one note for this episode, I think I'm going to put on my desk at work. It's watch that boy redneck. That is my one note for today.
That was our whole conversation before we even started the episode. We spent 20 minutes just chatting about this scene.
Yeah, going, what exactly was the line? I wanted to make sure I had that line exactly right.
Awesome.
Funny. I was having a hard time, or I was worried that I was going to keep calling Walt Bart.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've been called a lot worse.
I take that as a compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like Bart, Walt, Bart. Because I have names in my head all day long. I get people's names confused all day long. As
I can imagine.
1,000 addresses and names in my head. So
I don't know how you keep it all straight.
Oh, Walt, do you have any, besides the note you already reread, which we've discussed in great detail, anything else?
No. I just, this to me is one of my favorite minutes of the movie for a lot of reasons. And I just love Bart's firing right back at him and not taking his crap.
I do.
Yeah,
I love
reinforcement.
The only thing I'm going to add is you say reinforcement. It reinforces sort of a similar scene. The movie started off with all the railroad workers on one side of the track and all of the railroad employees or on the other side. And we are getting, now this is where I don't have a problem with a mirror scene because now there's something different about the scene. Now Bart
absolutely
has power and Bart is about to take control. And Bart also has friends. And I can't wait to keep diving into this scene because I don't think Taggart and Lyle are going to take this too well, a black sheriff.
No.
All right, so that was my last note, just to remind everybody about the fact that now we've got these two sides squaring off once again. All right, well, Gordie, you are our guest. We've been your host. Tell us where people can find out more about you.
Well, I'm over there on the Facebook. I've got the GORDCAST. I have Instagram. Also, if you punch my name in, Gordie Adams, it should show up. Twitter, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to. I have it just so I can keep a track of other people, like the president at times. But just keeping informed with what other people are doing, but Twitter is like, whatever. So yeah, this was really fun. This was really cool. I want to say, because there was this off-air thing that never organically came up, and there was a confusion about if you should call me Gordie or Gordon, and most people call me Gordie, and I am named after Gordie Howe, the Detroit Red Wings' best hockey player on the planet. And for some reason, I heard that you were maybe talking about that before, or maybe a little continuity.
We did. Last week, we had an attorney in here.
I want to know how that happened.
Yeah, last week we had an attorney in here who also is a huge sports guy, especially college sports. And we were talking about everything from hockey to SEC football to his hate for Auburn. And it just happened to come up.
Yeah, and I'm a huge hockey fan. And I actually got to see Gordie Howe and his two sons play against the Atlanta Flames.
When he was on the Whalers?
When he was on the Whalers. And that, to me, is one of the greatest sports memories I have, is seeing the three of them play. And Gordie Howe, of course, played in 5 different decades, played professional hockey in 5 different decades. So he is one of my all-time favorite sports legends.
Whenever I introduce myself like Gordie Howe, like the hockey player, Gordie Howe.
I have a even saying hockey player.
I know.
There's not really a word to describe him. And
I have a program. My grandfather worked for the Penguins in Pittsburgh, and I have a program when they played in 71, I think, maybe 72. And it's Gordie Howe is on the cover of it, and it says "To Gordie from Gordie," and it's
my gosh.
I won't be buried, but if I was, that was going to be in the coffin with me.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. I hope that's framed or under glass or something. Yeah, I got to meet Bobby Orr one time, and that is my other one of my other great favorite hockey moments. But Gordie Howe was absolutely amazing, so that's a great name to carry.
See, my claim to fame with the Detroit Red Wings is I grew up in Detroit when they sucked, and I moved, and they suddenly became the dominant team that ever. Right. I'd be like, what the hell?
Yeah, that happens.
You guys used to suck so bad. Then I move, and now you're like, everyone says they're going to go to the Stanley Cup again. Like, what? The what?
Yeah. Well, the Flames left here and won the Stanley Cup, and So anyway,
Atlanta's a horrible town, except for soccer. We got our only championship in like recent memory. We have one World Series with was it 93 Braves?
95.
95 Braves. 93 was the first year they got there in a long time. But the 95, that was it. We don't have a Super Bowl win. We don't have Atlanta sucks.
We have a soccer win. We have a minor league hockey win. But not much else.
All right. So. Well, where can people learn more about us? Hold on. I interrupted Gordie. He was in the middle of telling us, right. And we got on the rabbit trail of sports. So
the Wilder ride turned into the sports ride. It's just sorry, it's my fault for the hockey thing.
You were named after Gordie Howe, but now you talked about Twitter and other things. But what are your podcasts
I talked about that. I've been a guest on the Indiana Jones Minute. season 2 and season 3, getting ready for season 4. The Crystal Skull, which I know, but I'm going to do it because I love it and I love them. And I was just recently on That's Cool, That's Trash with my friend Matt Howell, and we covered a really terrible quote unquote Western movie filmed in the Philippines called The Wild Wild West, featuring the diminutive actor Wang Wang, who's I'm sure you've all seen him.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've all seen him. He's like 007 and Kid Dynamite, and he's this little guy actor in the 80s who it's terrible, but so much fun to talk about.
I was going to say it's one of those really great terrible movies.
Yeah. No, it's a B movie, and I've been watching B movies since I was 4. So
awesome.
Why not?
You and I are in good company.
All right. Well, where can people learn more about The Wilder Ride?
Well, we don't have any. We haven't covered any Wing movies yet, but what we have covered, you can find on our website at thewilderride.com. And from there, you can find all our links on social media and all that other good stuff. You can find our biographies and the biographies of our guests. And anything exciting coming up, we will post there and let you know all of our exciting happenings.
Excellent. Well, I want to encourage everyone to come back tomorrow. We mentioned the Indiana Jones Minute. We mentioned that Gordie's been on that show as a guest. Well, guess what? We've got all 3 of them coming up tomorrow. Tom Taylor, Pete Mummert, Jerry Porter. We are going to have the Indiana Jones Minute guys continue this conversation as Bart squares off with Taggart, Lyle, and all these other guys on horseback. And so come on back tomorrow to kick off that conversation, minute number 67 on this, The Wilder Ride.
Watch that redneck shit.
Look, I get burned real easy, and I can't help that. That's just
So can you reverse that? Watch that redneck shit, boy. I don't think that's going to work.
That's not going to work.
Watch that boy redneck. Wait,
watch that redneck shit, mailman.
Watch that redneck shit, Yankee. That could work, right?
How about neck red boy that watch?
Well, I think any way you slice it, you're...
You said, could you reverse it?
Yeah. Very good. Good job.
Or should I do it like what?
Can't we all just get along?
That'd be a lot easier. We are diving into Blazing Saddles 1. Watch that boy redneck.
You got this. You got this.
One.
You want me to try?
More time. Oh crap.
The principal?
Yeah, no, not the principal. The lead bad kid. Oh, what's his name? Oh my God.
Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson's character.
Nelson.
What was his character's name?
I can't remember.
Cletus. No, that's not it.
Cletus the slack-jawed yokel.
Cletus?
Let's see. If only there was a...
If only we had a magic box and then I could edit this out. Oh yeah, I can.
Let's see.
Let's look it up real quick.
I remember I was compared to him by a cheerleader girlfriend that I had when I was young, but I don't remember his name.
John Bender.
Bender.
Okay,
right. Oh, stop.
Well, and see, I think
I'm doing the French mistake.
Gosh.
Sorry. Sorry.